1. So, today was easily one of the most frustrating shifts I've had since New Year's Eve. I don't know what was going on, but there must have been something in the damn water, because it was just chaos this morning. It started with me coming in at 6 a.m. Our night audit was passing on some information to me about last night, and what I can expect for this morning. Nothing crazy, some noise in the 4th floor, but only one complaint. Remember, the 4th floor. Breakfast was already set up and people were sitting there enjoying their food. Then a goddamn brawl starts between this one man and 2 other people that he was insulting. A lady was just minding her own business, getting her breakfast, when he just starts spewing random insults at her, calling her fat ass, ugly, etc. Telling some other guy he's gonna beat the shit out of him. Our night auditor was still here at this point because it was only a minute into my shift. I'm a small girl, not very threatening, while the night auditor is definitely more frightening than me. So he went over to this guy and told him that he either needed to knock it off or leave the property. Turns out this man had the same name as the night auditor, and when he found that out, he instantly calmed down. Okay. Not too long later, he's yelling at a different woman about taking 9 hours to make a damn waffle. And he didn't even need to use the waffle maker, and no one else was waiting. Night auditor says, "Come on, man, this is your last warning." He says okay again and relaxes and goes back up to his room on the 4th floor. About an hour later, a woman comes to the front desk screaming that her hot tub chemicals were completely off, and her entire family got chemical burns last night. Our staff checked the chemicals throughout last night, and this morning, they're normal. Also, no one else seemed to experience this. Keep in mind that children are not allowed in the hot tub, because the hot water may be a little too harsh for them, which is clearly stated next to the hot tub. She just continued to yell and scream at me continuously, despite me saying that I don't have any control over the pool. I am not certified to mess with any of the chemicals. I wasn't even here last night. I gave her the number to corporate. I don't know about your brand, but ours literally does not give a fuck if you call corporate. It does nothing. She was talking down to me like I was dumb. Told her I'd pass it off to the manager, who was not here at the time. We do not have a manager on duty, it's only one front desk employee and housekeeping most of the time. She didn't care, she just continued to yell and scream. Once she walked away, I was just so frustrated that I had to go sit down and cry for a few minutes. Now, I'm not saying she was wrong, I'd be upset as well. But screaming at someone who is telling you repeatedly that they don't have any control and that they'd be happy to have their manager contact you is just shitty. Don't make employees cry. Then, as they were checking out, people who were on the 4th floor complained that a certain room was up at all hours of the night, screaming and whatnot, constantly. If you think that's it, though, you're wrong. I get a call from the 4th floor, and they tell me that someone is walking up and down the hallway, knocking on doors saying, "It's the police, open up, it's the police." Well, it was not the police. And I am not positive, but I'm pretty goddamn sure it was our good old friend from breakfast, who was trying to fight everyone. My manager checks the cameras, there is no one walking in the hallway. Later I get another complaint. I go up there and it's silent. I think it was him because he was yelling randomly in the lobby, not really at anyone around checkout time. I believe he may be mentally ill, so I didn't try to argue with him. Someone came by to pick him up, and he just left. In the middle of all the bullshit, a very nice man who is a regular with us asked me for some change. Then he tried to give me a $5 tip, but I wouldn't take it. It didn't feel right, but he asked me if I liked coffee, so I said yeah. Later in the day, after everyone had checked out, he came back to bring me a coffee. He saw me running back and forth, trying to do 10 things at once this morning, and I'm sure at some point he saw my swelling eyes after crying, and he went out of his way to spend his own money on something for me. There are decent people in the world still. 2. Hockey parent EPs are some of the worst. The worst team to visit was from California. They were affluent, cocky, and inconsiderate. Already that week there were altercations with staff of color and other hockey parents. And we were glad we quarantined them to the top 8th floor, away from other teams. The last night of the tournament lined up with the big fight on PPV, and the EPs were slowly filtering back from a sports bar down the road. I was on the late shift this time, and the head of security, Don, and I were laughing. It was almost peaceful. Around 11 p.m. we got a call from a frantic guest saying their bathroom light was raining. I sent engineering up to the 5th floor, and a few moments later he calls out on the radio he needs Don and 2 other engineers immediately. Then the kitchen manager radioed, saying part of the ceiling collapsed and water had flooded into the kitchen. Another call rang out from housekeeping, saying the same thing just happened in the laundry room and break room adjacent to the kitchen. All the flooding reports were from the same wing of the building, and we just renovated rooms on that side. We were concerned something happened to a water pipe somewhere during construction, but the head engineer wouldn't be back until morning. We get another call, this time from a businessman on the 8th floor. Water was flowing into his room from the hallway, and Don heads up there. Don comes back down about 30 minutes later, furious and soaked up to his shins. One of the California EPs got wasted, then decided he wanted a bath. He plugged up the tub and turned the nozzle on high. He then went to sit on the couch and fell asleep with the water still on. Based on the timeline, talking with other parents and EP's son, who left the room when his dad came back drunk, the tub had most likely been running for hours. The EP was still plastered, and Don left him up there in the care of a fellow hockey parent, so he could decide what to do with the general manager in the morning. I gave the rundown to the overnight staff and told them I would be back in the morning to relieve them. It was one of the few times I was glad to have back-to-back close and open shifts, because I could see how the whole story played out. The next morning, the GM and head engineer were still racking up the cost of the damage, but it was easily over $10,000. In addition to his own room, he damaged recently renovated rooms on floors 8 through 4, and once it got to the 3rd floor, it followed the wiring and pipes through the walls down to the kitchen, laundry room, and lifeguard break rooms, where it busted through the ceiling. There are safeguards in hotels to deal with the occasional overflow tub or toilet, but the volume of the constantly running tub was enough to overpower the system. It was up to me to get a copy of EP's ID and get the GM when he arrived. EP comes down 2 hours after checkout time, his hair well done and wearing a Rolex the size of my head. I knocked on the desk twice to signal my front desker to get back up. While I talked with EP, when I asked for his ID, he got ugly. "There's no reason you need my ID." "I'm afraid there is, sir. I've been instructed to get a copy for our records, as there was some significant damage during your stay." "Look, lady, if your shithole can't withstand a little water, that's not my problem. I build hotels in California, ones that make this place look like a crack house. I know for a fact hotels are supposed to have systems to prevent flooding." "Yes, sir, they do, but in this case..." "I know you're only doing this because I make more money in a minute than you will see in your entire life. But if you want to go down this road with me..." I just smiled politely, and reiterated that he needed to hand over his ID. Then the GM came whipping round the corner. He relieved me to go on break. But I heard the GM say, "I'm trying to handle this civilly, but if you want to make this difficult, I'm sure the police will be thrilled to accommodate you." I know they filed a claim with insurance, but I don't know much of what happened after that. I hope he paid every penny. To clarify, the total damage cost was way over $10,000. But I never found out what the grand total was. The last figure the head engineer told me was easily over $10,000, so I left it at that. 3. One day a man, and what I assumed to be his girlfriend, decided to check into our hotel. At the time of the check-in, it was my day off, so I am not 100% on how the actual check-in went. But from my coworker, I was told that they were pissed drunk to the point of not being able to even stand. The next morning, I'm working a morning shift. Normal, I'm the night auditor. And this man and his girlfriend come up, let's call him Drunk Man. It's about probably 9 in the morning, and he is already swaying and reeking of fresh popped beer cans. "Hello. I like your room so much, we would like to rent it for another night." "Absolutely, sir, that will be no problem." I check him in for another night, thinking there would be no problem to it. About 2 hours later, the housekeeper comes down and tells us about her cleaning the room, and that there was excessive amounts of alcohol and cigarettes. Now, we don't have a problem with the alcohol. The man is over 21, and so is his girlfriend. No problem there. The problem was we had placed him in a non-smoking room. We only actually have 2 smoking rooms, and they are our least rented rooms because they are some of our more expensive rooms. So we go about our routine of grabbing their credit card and charging him for the cost of smoking in a non-smoke room. We run his card numbers. Denied. We lowered the price from 200 to 150, denied, down to 50, denied, down to 25, denied. So after this, we decide not to allow him to stay another night, seeing as he obviously didn't even have the money to stay another night. We lock out his room, make new cards to make it so the door doesn't read the cards in his possession. About an hour later, these people somehow made it back into the room. We ask them to come down to the front office to talk, because we were expecting them to come down to the front office anyways if their cards didn't work. "Excuse me, sir, this is the front desk speaking. Would you be so kind to come down to the front office as soon as possible?"
"What the fuck for?"
"Well, sir, we need to discuss some of the issues the housekeepers have found with your room."
"Fine."
He eventually makes it down, and we discuss that we cannot let him stay another night in the room without paying some kind of smoking fee.
"Well, nobody had told me it was a non-smoking room."
Well, there are multiple signs stating that it is a non-smoking room.
"I'm not paying you shit. We were never told anything."
"Well, you did sign the paperwork that states that we have put you in a non-smoking room, and that if you break these rules, you will have to pay a fee." Eventually, it gets to the point where him and his girlfriend are screaming at us because they were so drunk last night that they shouldn't have been expected to read. What blasphemy! Reading a legal document about renting a room? That is asking too much. The way that he tried to make this end is by slapping a $50 bill on the counter and saying,
"I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you this 50, and I'm going to walk out of here and we will never come here again."
I tell him that is not possible. We have tried to negotiate with him, even reducing the price of the fee down to $100. But he will not stop yelling at us, acting like it should come out of my paycheck. Eventually, my manager called the police and took the man to his bank to get another $50 to pay the $100 that we narrowed our price down to. I have got to say that having the police there to cool the man down was a relief. He was starting to get more and more aggressive as the argument went on, and I was concerned for my managers and my safety. Eventually, everything was solved, he was vacated from the premises, and that issue was over with. Afterwards, I went up to the room to see what the housekeeper was talking about. There was probably about a box of Bud Light, like a 30-pack, mind you, completely gone. Four. This little caper happened when I was working down at a fairly nice beach resort on the Florida coast. It was a high-end place, but not so high-end that we didn't get the occasional riffraff who just loved to tell me how much they were paying for their room and how that meant I should wipe their ass for them. Luckily, those types of guests were the exception to the rule. One day, though, I was unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of a call from a middle-aged couple, who I will be referring to as the Karens. I call them that because this man and his wife might as well have had "Can I speak to the manager" written on a t-shirt, with how much attitude they would give any member of staff they spoke to. Anyway, one day I get a call from their room, and they tell me that the housekeepers had robbed them. I was already dubious as I know all the housekeepers personally, and they were all the sweetest older Latino women that you'd ever met. Certainly not thieves. However, our hotel took these accusations very seriously, so we asked them to come down to the front desk to speak about it in person. The Karens come down, and I am expecting to hear about how the housekeepers must have stolen the woman's jewelry, or a laptop or something. I pull them off to the side to speak with them personally and ask them what happened. Right off the bat, Mrs. Karen, with as much attitude as she could cram into her middle-aged frame, tells me that the housekeeper stole her children's pool floaties. It took me a moment to register what she was telling me. A pool floaty. This couple was adamant that the housekeepers had decided to risk their livelihoods to steal 2 pool floaties from their room that they had bought for $5 each from the Target down the street. I assured them that this must be a misunderstanding and I would get housekeeping on phone to get to the bottom of this. They wait in the lobby while I call housekeeping and explain the situation. I told them that I knew this whole thing was silly, but I would appreciate it if they could check with the housekeeper who cleaned the room and see if maybe it got thrown out on accident. A deflated pool floaty could easily look like garbage, I suppose. The housekeepers checked the laundry room to see if it was mixed in with the sheets from turn-down service, and even the trash from the room. No dice, and no pool floaty to be found. I tell the Karens that no pool floaty had turned up, despite the thorough check with the housekeeping department. Mr. and Mrs. Karen gave me an eye roll and slunk off to the pool adjacent to the lobby. I shrugged, assuming that would be the last energy I'd have to waste in the search for $10 worth of Target pool floaties. How wrong I was. Half an hour later, a local police officer strolls into the lobby, and before I can ask him what the problem was, the Karens stroll right up to him and tell him that they had been robbed by the housekeeper and that they wanted to file a police report for the 2 missing floaties. The officer, apparently, was having a very slow day and decided to humor them by sitting down and helping them file a report for the stolen goods. All the while, they're throwing smug glances at me as if they just cracked the case that is going to bring the whole hotel down as the criminal headquarters it must be. At this point, I decide to call up my supervisor and explain the situation, mostly just so it would be off my hands. I had reached my limit of ridiculousness for the day. The officer tells him that he would file the report back at the station and left, to do what I can only assume was throw the report in the outside trash can and consider detaining them for wasting emergency services resources. That's when my supervisor came into the mix and offered to buy them 2 new floaties, with her own money, from the bodega across the street. They likely realized that they were not going to see any housekeepers thrown in the clink that day and begrudgingly accepted the offer. Later that day, a different housekeeper, per their explicit request, did turn down service for the room. As they were changing the sheets, lo and behold, they found something underneath the sheets at the foot of the bed. 2 deflated pool floaties. When my supervisor heard this, she decided she wanted a little gotcha moment with the Karens. So she called them up from the phone number we had on file. She explained that the floaties that this lovely couple had spent the entire morning talking to management and police about had been in the room the entire time. She fully expected them to apologize for all the trouble they'd caused, or at least to sound somewhat embarrassed. Mr. Karen's response to that call:
It's a little suspicious that those 2 floaties just happened to show up after we made a scene about it.
I could see my manager's jaw drop in disbelief at the boldness of this couple. She replied, "You two be sure to have a great day," and hung up the phone. 5. So I work in a mid-range hotel at the front desk, and I work primarily second shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Today I had the unpleasant experience of having to send a new front desk clerk home early, after he was extremely disrespectful. So this guy, R, started on Saturday, and he had Sunday off. So today was literally his second day on the job. And I don't know about y'all, but on the second day of a new job, I'm still very much in the phase of asking questions, watching how things are done, and maybe handling a check-in by myself at the end of the day. I would also be taking extensive notes the entire time. Maybe that's just me, but I know I have terrible memory, so I work to combat that. R did none of that. His first day, he asked maybe 1 question and took no notes. I was very tired from lack of sleep at the time, so I chalked up the lackluster performance to my lack of availability to effectively train someone when I was tired. Then came today. Today he was wanting to do everything himself, even though he was making mistake after mistake, and started getting snippy when I would correct him and show him the correct way of doing things. No joke. I showed him 5 times how to swipe a card to get it on a reservation, and he was still fucking it up. Then I left him alone for a few minutes so I could grab something to eat, and he checked in a corporate lodging reservation incorrectly. Now, I don't know how other hotels handle these types of reservations, but at my property we take a copy of the guest ID and a corporate lodging card, and also put a credit card on file for incidentals. Well, he did none of that, so I was trying to get a hold of the guest in order to get those things, but he wasn't picking up in the room, and of course R didn't get his phone number. So I'm freaking out a little bit. Not gonna lie. If I don't get that information, the hotel will not get payment for the room, and since I was training R, the responsibility was mine. So I explained to him politely that this was a big deal, and why he needed to make sure not to do this in the future. He began saying something like it wasn't a big deal for him because I'm new and expected to make mistakes. So I went no. You need to understand how big of a mistake this could be, and you need to take this seriously because it's a serious mistake. He said it wasn't a big deal, and that I was a smart girl who had it handled, so it wasn't a problem. I deactivated the guest keys to try to get him to come to the front desk. But that is by no means a foolproof plan. I asked him not to speak to me like that. The smart girl comment came off as very condescending to me. And he started going off saying that I wasn't a manager, I wasn't above him, I wasn't anybody, blah blah blah. In the middle of all this, he stated that he didn't need this job, and I can take this job seriously or not, if I want to. To the last statement I responded that perhaps he shouldn't work here if he wasn't willing to take the job seriously. He was getting into my personal space at this point, so I made the decision to step back and call our front desk manager before I lost my temper. So I went into the room behind the front desk to do so. I explained to her his behavior, and was instructed to tell R to go home and that she, our manager, would be calling him in the morning, so I do that. The first words out of his mouth were to call me a snitch, and then proudly tell me he was gonna tell our manager I left him at the desk alone. Even though I left him with my phone number with the instructions to call me if anything popped up he didn't know how to do, or even if he wasn't sure he knew how to do it. He then said he was going to get me fired, to which I simply told him to leave. He went in the back to do his drop, and passed by me to clock out, and called me a snitch again while a guest was standing at the desk. So yeah, I'm going to be calling my manager tomorrow morning to give her a more detailed account of what happened, once I've had a chance to calm the fuck down. Update. So I talked to my manager, and R isn't going to be fired. She said that since our cameras near the front desk don't have audio, she can't know for certain what was said, and it would turn into a he said, she said type of thing. She also said that I shouldn't have left him up at the front desk by himself, even though I left my phone number if he needed anything, and that it sets a bad precedent, which I frankly don't understand. He had every opportunity to call and ask when he ran into something he didn't know how to do. But whatever. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable training him anymore, and that I had never really felt comfortable training others. I didn't say that it's really fucking annoying to be placed in a position I didn't sign up for, let alone being put in that situation without so much as a text letting me know, but I was sure as hell thinking it. Finally, she said she wouldn't have hired him if she didn't think he would be a good fit for the team, and maybe it was just a personality clash, and that she wants R and I to sit down at some point and try to talk it out, which I am not fucking looking forward to. I'm so done with today. Thank God I have the next 2 days off. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw number 20. Thought it was about time I did another one of these. It's been a little while. I think most of us can relate to working in places in regards to the last story, where we've all had that one employee who just doesn't really seem to care about the job. They don't want to do it, no one knows how they got it, and if you don't see that guy at your workplace, you probably are that guy. I'm joking, of course. Some of you might be lucky. Though, in my experience, those are the type of employees who generally get promoted out of sight. They're so bad at the job, but somehow people like them and they get ahead based on that. It's always irksome. Ah well. With that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.